Illinois Gubernatorial Forum presented by the Progressive Democrats of America Chicago chapter. Thank you for choosing to spend part of your Saturday learning where the Democratic candidates who are running for Illinois governor stand on the issues and learning how they differ on those issues. I am Laura Luckman-Kelber. I am the chair of the Chicago chapter of the Progressive Democrats of America. I became chair right here on this very stage in February. I was here with a very small group of concerned Americans gathered to see how they could make a real difference. Many of these people were longtime activists, and many, like me, were newly active. Fortified by a healthy dose of hubris, truly, we decided that we would host a gubernatorial forum as our very first thing that we did. Everything you see here today was pulled together by a handful of volunteers. I'm going to stress a handful, all of whom who also have serious day jobs. I work in advertising, so anybody who works in advertising knows we work 60-plus hour weeks. I did this too. I mention this because it's important, really important, for each of us to remember that for our democracy to work, our democracy to work, we must do more than vote. The good news is, it's easier to do than you might think. And your very first step is coming to this forum on this crappy day. And what I want to challenge everyone here is, what will you do next? Our hope is that you will leave here feeling this was 2 hours well spent, that you know a bit more about these candidates than you would just being fed corporate media sound bites and Facebook algorithms. Before we get started, I would like to thank our co-sponsors, the 32nd Ward Democrats, the 33rd Ward Democrats, the 39th Ward Democratic Organization, the 40th Ward Alliance, Chicago350.org, the Democratic Socialists of America, Frack Free Illinois, Jobs with Justice, Raise Your Hand, Illinois Single Payer Coalition, and United for Democracy Now! I would also like to thank the candidates and their campaign teams. It has been a pleasure working with all of them and getting to know them a little bit through this process. As public servants, their commitment to their constituents is all-encompassing, and taking the time to come here today to share with you their views is just one important facet of their duty to us, the people. We reached out to all the campaigns in July. I did. It was super fun. Mr. Pritzker's campaign was the very first to respond. I was super excited, asked my husband. I got a response. And confirmed today's date, and note that today was the preferred date for his schedule. The other campaigns agreed to the date of today's forum. Last week, we received a call from Mr. Pritzker's campaign staff letting us know that he now had a family obligation and would not be able to make the forum. He offered a surrogate. We declined the surrogate and wondered if maybe something might shift, and maybe he could potentially attend. Serious optimist here all the time. We confirmed yesterday that he will not be attending today. This will allow the candidates who are present today more time to share their views with you. Please feel free to share via your favorite social media channel today. Our hashtag is PDA-CHI-Forum, PDA-CHI-FORUM. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to the candidates. We have Mr. Tio Hardiman, Senator Daniel Biss, Mr. Alex Peterakis, Mr. Chris Kennedy, and Superintendent Bob Diber. I would like to also introduce to you our moderator, Marianne Ahern, who's the political reporter for NBC Chicago. Thank you. Yes. By the way, she's doing this as a volunteer. She is also doing a civic action right here. So clap for her. She's a very busy lady. And then I also am now going to introduce you to Don Olson, who will walk you through our rules for today's forum. Thank you again.
Hello. I first want to stress to you that what we're doing here today is only a half of PDA Chicago's gubernatorial candidate project. The other half was to give a written questionnaire to the candidates, which they all filled out, including Mr. Pritzker. And if you go to our PDA Chicago Facebook page, you can find that. We really highly recommend to you that you do read the written answers. They have a different flavor from what you'll hear today. The candidates, of course, could not see how the other candidates were answering, and so there's a lot of divergence there that's very interesting. So, that being said, I also want to assure everyone that every plastic bottle you see on the stage today will be recycled. So just calm down, okay? We're hoping that what today really is it's an educational experience. And we've designed this forum to be the best educational experience we can have in the allotted time. So, educational experience, that sounds like school, doesn't it? And you know that in school, you have rules that have to be followed. But of course, these rules are only for our own good, right? So, our rules are, first of all, we have rules for the audience. And the number one rule is no audience reactions. There will be no clapping, no booing, no hissing, no cheering. We're trying to create an atmosphere where the candidates can think, and we want them to thoughtfully share with us, so we don't want any distractions. There's another more practical reason for that, though. If we actually allowed you to clap after every answer that they give today, if we only allowed you to clap for 20 seconds, we would spend 25 minutes clapping today. And I don't think anybody came here today to hear themselves clap. We came here to hear the candidates. So it's a very practical reason we ask you all not to have any reaction. Until afterwards, we'll have a round of applause for everyone. Now, the rules for the candidates. This is a forum, not a debate. And so we ask the candidates to direct their comments to the audience, not to each other. The candidates are going to be timed. We're going to give the exact same amount of time to each candidate. They will, when the 0 card goes up, we will allow them to finish their thought, but we ask them not to extend it unnecessarily. Now here's the really hard rule. The really, really hard rule. We're going to ask the candidates, are you ready for this? To please answer the question that was asked. Now, just between us, you know that when people ask us questions, we usually answer them. But we all know that politicians are a breed apart. And they have these little things they do. They dodge questions, and they do this thing called pivoting. Oh, there's one thing I forgot to tell you about audience. We have security in the room, and you will be given, if someone does make an unnecessary outburst, they'll be given one warning, and if they do it again, they'll be escorted out of the room. So we're being tough on this. Now, back to this answer the question thing. We did consider using that same tactic for the candidates. Like, we'd let them pivot once, but if they did it again, we'd escort them out of the room. Don't worry, we decided not to do that after careful deliberation because, just between you and me, we figured we couldn't afford to lose any more candidates. Okay. So, we don't really have rules for Marianne Ahern. We have guidelines and we have duties for her. So she is going to be asking the questions. And we want you to know that the questions that are being asked today came primarily from our participating co-host groups that are issue-based groups. And this forum is going to be very definitely focused on issues more than personalities. Marianne, of course, has all power, which I'm bestowing on her right now.
Yikes.
To call the candidates back to the question, should they inadvertently drift. Marianne also, I'll explain the format a little bit in a minute, but she will be asking follow-up questions, and she's got a lot of latitude with that as well. So here's the format of the forum today. We were not going to have opening statements, but because we have a little bit more time because of Mr. Pritzker's absence, we're going to be giving the candidates a 1-minute opening statement. Then the questions will start. Marianne will read the question, and every candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the question, which they will do from the podium. Then we're going to have a 30-second follow-up round where every candidate gets 30 seconds to say something more about the issue, to answer criticisms from other candidates, or should Marianne decide she wants to do this, she can ask questions. She can ask one question of all the candidates. She can ask individual questions of individual candidates, should she so desire. She's all-powerful. And I think that's it. We've given Marianne license to use whatever disciplinary measures she sees fit. She's like the teacher in the classroom. So, Eric, are you ready to go? Eric Filson is our timekeeper today. Marianne, it's up to you to discipline them now.
All right, former teacher that I am, it'll be just great. Welcome to everyone. Great to see you all. Let's start with our opening statements of our candidates, and we're going to start with Mr. Hardiman. Tio.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm Tio Hardiman, and I'm glad to be here. I'm running for governor for the second time. I ran for governor back in 2014 and secured close to 30% of the state vote and won 30 counties downstate. I'm glad to be here. My running mate's name is Patricia Avery. She's a former president of the NAACP in Champaign-Urbana, and she's a former county commissioner also in Central Illinois. Our platform includes supporting the progressive tax here, the financial transaction tax. We also support raising the minimum wage of $15 an hour and women's rights all the way. I hold a master's degree in inner city studies. I'm currently serving as an adjunct professor at Governor State University and North Park University, and a lot of people support the Hardiman Avery ticket right now. So far, we've secured about 8,000 signatures on our petitions, and we plan to turn in 10,000 signatures. We have volunteers statewide working with us right now, and we're looking to secure about 300,000 votes to win this primary, and it can be done. A lot of these big money politicians are trying to drown out the voices of the working class and poor people. If you want a sincere progressive Democrat, then support Tio Hardiman. I'm very passionate about everybody in Illinois, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Biss.
Good afternoon. We're eating up my time here. Let's try that again, though. Good Lord. Good afternoon. There it is. Thank you. My name is Daniel Biss. I'm state senator in the 9th District, running for governor of Illinois. I have a lot of friends in the room. I'm not going to go through my usual introduction about how I used to teach math and saw a country spinning to war based on lies and became an organizer and then an elected official. I just want to say this. We're in the fight for the soul of the Democratic Party right now. And there's a reason for that. It's because we are living in an era of unique concentration of wealth and unique concentration of power. Our economy is changing, and our government has not changed with it. The question is, will the Democratic Party understand that and develop policies that take power back for the rest of us, or are we going to continue in this reckless and dangerous path? That question's on the ballot in this primary. And to solve it, we don't need a person, we don't need a hero, we need a movement of people coming together to transform our politics collectively. Thank you to all the groups organizing this event for your role in that movement. I look forward to the afternoon.
Thank you. Mr. Paterakis.
My name is Alex Paterakis. I'm a civil engineer and small business owner. And I know some of you may be disappointed that J.B. Pritzker wasn't here, but I did find him in the green room. It's a Splenda packet. It may look real, but ultimately it's fake. But ultimately, we have a choice right now. We have a governor that has destroyed our state, that keeps going to these small communities and telling these small communities, it's all Chicago's problems. We need to fight the system, fight everything, because those people in Chicago are making out like bandits. But there's two kinds of people in Illinois. There's one group that wants to divide us, and there's the rest of us. We need common sense reform in this state. We need progressive income tax. We need to legalize the sale of cannabis. We need criminal justice reform. And these are basic things that, unfortunately, Democrats, which have been in power for 30 plus years, have not taken the initiative to do. I'm fighting here because I struggle as a business owner in Illinois. A lot of people are struggling in Illinois. But ultimately, together, fighting the people that want to divide us can actually accomplish something. Thank you.
Mr. Kennedy.
Hi, I'm Chris Kennedy. I'd like to introduce my running mate, Rod Joy, who's with us today, and also my daughter, Sarah Kennedy, who's a preschool teacher at the Earl School in Englewood, and it's great to have her here. I arrived in Illinois in 1987 to join the fight against hunger that was created by the President of the United States, President Reagan. I arrived in Chicago in 1987. It was the coolest city in America. Everybody looked up to Chicago then. It had dealt with this issue that we were going to become majority-minority in the United States. We had elected Harold Washington as our mayor, and kids from all over the Midwest wanted to move here. That's not the city we live in today. Nobody admires us. We're shrinking in size, and as we become smaller, we become whiter. There's a relentless attack on people of color in the city and a relentless attack on poor people in our state. I'm running for governor to stop all of that. Thank you.
Superintendent Diber.
Thank you for having me this afternoon. It's great to see some of you I have met. I'm Bob Diber. I'm the Regional Superintendent of Schools in Madison County. For 38 years, I've served in capacity in public education, 28 as a career and technical teacher, the last 10 as a regional superintendent, which is a countywide elected position. I've served 22 years in local government at all levels, from city council to township, 2 terms on a county board before I was a countywide elected official. My wife, Karen, is with me this afternoon. We've been married 25 years as of November 14th, and she and I come from pioneer families in Illinois. We've been here for 4 generations, and we're not a family that plans on leaving. I'm running for governor to make this state whole again and prosperous as it was that our founding fathers found it. With us this afternoon is also my running mate, Jonathan Todd. Jonathan's from the Austin community in the city of Chicago. And Jonathan and I hope to work together to unify Illinois and bring together what this administration has made an effort to divide. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you to all of you. The first question deals with education. As Don told you, I will read the question. It'll be the same question to all of you. We're going to have Senator Biss go first with the question. Illinois ranks last in state funding for public education. The recently passed school funding bill does reform the funding formula, but it does require $6 billion over the next decade to meet those requirements. How will we raise this revenue? And what further reforms will you propose in school funding? Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Mr. Hardeman.
Yeah, when it comes down to school funding, what I'm looking at funds the Hardeman and Avery 2020 plan, which represents the perfect vision for the people of Illinois. We plan to fund the schools with the progressive tax, and there's a House Bill 453, which is the business transaction tax. That bill can bring in $3 billion of new revenue to the state, and the progressive tax can bring in $2 billion of new revenue, and we will use those funds to make sure the schools are funded properly statewide. A lot of times we just think about Chicago, but we have to fund schools throughout the state of Illinois, so that's where we will get the resources from to make sure that we fund the schools properly throughout our state here. What I don't like that's going on here in Chicago, it appears that every year school funding for Chicago public school students, the funding's in limbo. So you got to think about psychologically how that impacts students throughout Chicago, and we have to stop this political game banging when it comes down to school funding. And that's why I'm running for governor, because I would like to fix a lot of the problems that the state is experiencing right now because of these big money politicians that continue to drown out the voices, once again, of the working class and poor people. I would like to be seen as the non-billionaire, non-millionaire candidate, a regular candidate running for governor. I believe Pritzker got a call from Rahm Emanuel today and told him not to come down here today. That's what I believe happened with Pritzker, to be honest with you. I'm a progressive Democrat. What you see with me and the way I talk is what you get all the way, because I believe in the great people of Illinois. I have a relationship with over 400,000 people statewide, and when it comes back to the school, I'm going to be direct with you. That's how I would fund the schools moving forward as the governor of the state of Illinois. Okay?
How will you raise the revenue is the question.
Now, we'll raise the revenue first and foremost out of the financial transaction tax. That's $3 billion. That's a House bill right now. As soon as I become the governor, I would sign that bill into law, and we'll raise that $3 billion. Right now, the lottery pays around $697 million. I think they gave $697 million to the schools, and we would use the money from the lottery as well. But we have to stop funding schools from the taxes, taxing people. We have to stop funding schools from taxing people, okay? We need to move it to the progressive tax. But to be honest with the audience here, the progressive tax will not take place until we have a constitutional amendment. So that may not take place until 2020 or sometime like that, but that's how I would fund the schools.
Thank you.
A part of the funding. Then we get federal dollars as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Senator Biss, same question.
Let's start with that bill that passed. And you're right, Marianne, there are aspects of that bill that improved part of our school funding system. The bill also included a $75 million school voucher program. I voted no on that bill. I voted no on that bill as someone who's been fighting for school funding reform since before I ever ran for office, because I think there is a red line in the sand. Let's not divert public tax dollars into a private school voucher program. So let's start there. And guess what? The good parts of that bill are important, but they are a small step compared to the complete reform and overhaul of our school funding system that is necessary for a state that's last in the state in school funding equity. We are way too property tax reliant, more than any other state. And in order to move away from that, we need to get to the core of your question, which is how do you raise enough revenue on the state level to have a state school funding formula that actually works? Step one, we need a progressive income tax. We need a progressive income tax. We're one of only 4 states in the union whose constitution says you have to have a flat income tax. That is insanity. Step 2, we ought to pass a LaSalle Street tax. I'm a co-sponsor of a bill in the Senate to do that right now. Step 3, I passed a bill out of the Senate to close what some people call the carried interest loophole, but what I would prefer to call the Bruce Rauner loophole, a corrupt tax loophole for private equity and hedge fund managers that Donald Trump said he was going to close, but, well, Donald Trump. States need to take the lead, and the Illinois Senate was the first legislative chamber in the entire country to pass a bill like that, which would bring in the first year over $1 billion of revenue. So there are tools to bring in adequate revenue to fund progressive priorities if we finally overhaul our tax code from top to bottom, which is what we need to do because our economy has changed, all the money's gone to the top. That's where we ought to get it to fund our schools.
Thank you. Mr. Paterakis.
First, the bill that went through the House and Senate didn't go far enough. We should already be having free education, at least at the community college level. And also look at trade schools and reinvesting in high schools to teach kids that maybe college is not the best thing to go to. Maybe you can become something other than, and use your hands for a living. There's nothing wrong with that. And I went to Stevenson High School in Lincolnshire, which pretty much told us we needed to go to college. When we graduate college, we're gonna have a great job and everything's gonna be fine, but that's not the case. There's 5.8 million jobs right now in the United States that trade education would fill. But how do we pay for all this? First off, we have a huge issue of people leaving the state. And guess what? We can't tax people that leave the state. And everyone that stays here, we have to get taxed higher to make up the difference. So how do you keep those people in the state? First off, small businesses are the lifeblood of this state. And it's too hard to start a business. I've proposed what New York proposed in some areas, which was for certain industries, if you want to start a small business, we're going to support you, we're going to invest in you by giving you 4 to 5 years of tax-free revenue. So you can start up, you can hire people, and hire them at a higher wage. That builds everyone up. It's investing in the people. Also, too, through new tax revenues and making sure that tax revenue actually goes to its intended purpose, unlike lottery and gambling, with the legalization of cannabis, and using tax revenues from recreational use, but also the cultivation and farming of products like hemp products that we can use for our environment. Those are small things that'll bring people back to the state. But first and foremost, why are people leaving? It's because they don't see an opportunity in Illinois. Their family members are not getting the health care that they need, their kids are not getting the education they need. So we need to fix that first and foremost, so more people stay in the state, more people feel that they can grow and maintain and stay in the state, and that's how we raise the revenue.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy.
How we pay for our schools should matter to all of us because it determines the outcome of our education. When I graduated from high school, when I graduated from college, my friends and I, we moved to where the jobs are. That's not the way the American economy works anymore. Today, jobs are moving to where the highly educated kids are. If you give the world highly educated young people, the world will give you its jobs. That dynamic is not going to work in Illinois. In Chicago, there are 30 high schools where the average ACT score is a 14 or a 15. 75% of the kids who graduate high school anywhere in Illinois go to schools that are so underfunded that those kids graduate and they need remedial education in order to go on to community college or university. That's bad for everybody. We preserve that system because we pay for our schools with local property taxes. That's not the way they do it in other states. In other states, they pay for it with an income tax at the state level. That's what we should do here. Every state rep, every state senator knows that we should do that. Democrats especially understand that. We had a supermajority in the House, a supermajority in the Senate. We controlled the governor's mansion, and we did nothing to stop the economic servitude of the next generation. Why didn't we fix the problem? We didn't fix the problem because a handful of our leaders in the Democratic Party and in the Republican Party, in the House and the Senate, are property tax appeals lawyers. They're making money on a system that's damning our children and wrecking our economic future. The Sears Tower sold for $1.2 billion. It got $1 billion mortgage on it. The Cook County assessor, Joe Barrios, says it's only worth $579 million. The $600 million in missing value and the $30 million a year that it should have been paid in taxes is now being paid for by all of us.
Superintendent Diber.
Well, the bill that passed created a new funding formula called the evidence-based model. And many people think that this has solved the funding problem in the state of Illinois, but there's something I want to tell you, that not all schools are doing any better under this model than they were before. So how do we begin to fix that? I said this during the whole debate, the first and foremost thing that has to be done is that education has to be made whole in its funding. And you do that by prioritizing it in the appropriation of funds in the state budget. You do not agree upon a funding plan for public education on August 31st, when schools are wondering whether or not they're going to be able to make payroll on the first pay period of September. The funding appropriation needs to be done, and it needs to be the first and foremost important thing in the state budget, no matter if we pass progressive income tax, no matter if we pass the LaSalle Street tax, no matter if we pass the millionaire's tax. all good ideas, all which I support, all that bring more money to the general fund. But what if, again, we don't pass an appropriate bill for education until August 31st? You have to prioritize it because education is a statutory responsibility of the state, and that is the issue. So what do I propose? I've proposed a progressive income tax scale from 1 to 6% based on a base of $25,000 of base pay on that progressive model. I'm the only candidate that's laid out a scale. Why 1 to 6%? Everybody should pay some income tax. We have too many people at all levels that pay none. I believe that the upper level, the millionaires, I agree with the millionaire tax, they should pay about 3% more than everybody else because they can afford it. Those are some logic tax reforms. Those bring real revenue in to help fund schools, but you got to do it first. In 1992, I proposed a funding formula change. I said that we attach to IL 1040 schedules an education surcharge tax based on the same model in which if you're self-employed. That would have corrected it. I warned about where we would be today 25 years ago, and we're here.
Thank you. Now as a follow-up, sticking still with education, but just a 30-second response from each of you. Some think it's inappropriate for public money to support privatized, corporate-run charter schools. You have all supported, rather, a moratorium on the charters. All of you said that. Is it time to go further and start to phase out charter schools altogether? Why or why not? Mr. Hardiman, starting with you.
That's a good question. Well, you know, I definitely support a moratorium on charter school expansions here in Illinois. And one of the reasons, the main reason why I support the moratorium, you know, stopping the expansion is because now you have the owners of the charter schools going downstate trying to receive funding for those schools. If the schools are being financed by these millionaires and billionaires, then the reality is that they should continue to finance the schools and stop trying to depend on any state funding for those schools. That's not right. So in regards to stopping, I agree with stopping the expansion of charter schools, but just closing them down altogether, that would take a whole lot of political will, and it would take organizing the community on a higher level to make that a reality. And some of the charter schools have been around for a long time now, at least 4 or 5 years or more. So we have to make sure we organize the community around this issue. That's my response.
Thank you.
All right.
Senator Biss.
Thank you.
The direction I think we need to go is with real accountability. Charter schools have way too often totally evaded accountability and have continued to exist regardless of poor performance. So when it comes to rolling back charters, that's where I think you have to begin. I want to do a bit of follow-up to the earlier discussion, though, because we now have all these people on the stage talking about a progressive income tax used to fund a school funding formula that works. What I would ask is, where have people been? Where have people been? I've been fighting this fight, a lonely fight, for more than a decade now. When we had that supermajority of Democrats in both houses in Springfield, we needed help from the outside organizing with us as we were a few votes short. I've been in the trenches. That's how you know you can count on me to get it done.
Absolutely no public funding should be going to these charter schools. If they want to exist, they can exist, but we're not going to pay for it. I don't think closing any type of school is a good idea because they build around communities, but again, absolutely no funding should be going to these schools. We have an attack right now on teachers that we need to stop and stop the lies that the right wing is pushing on these lavish pensions these teachers are living. We're losing more and more teachers every day. We need to support our teachers and stop the expansion of charter schools.
I think it's incredibly arrogant to think that a governor or a mayor should be in a position to decide whose schools they're going to take away. I don't think that's the fight that we should be having right now. We should figure out how to fund the public schools in this state. The reason we haven't moved to a progressive income tax is because our leaders are making money on that system. We need to ban elected politicians from being property tax appeals lawyers.
I believe the question was, should there be a moratorium on the expansion of charter
Yes, that's
schools?
the question.
Yes, there should be a moratorium, and I go a step further. I support dissolving the Charter School Commission, okay? I support rolling back charter school students into our public schools, investing into public schools, making them the very best they should be. as great as they were before we began allowing funds to bleed off of our school districts to create charter schools. People in the audience need to understand this, that charter schools are funded by public school districts. There's no additional funds for a charter school. A district has a charter, they have to pay for it. That's that much less revenue that's actually used to pay for teachers, administrators, instructional support measures in that public school. So what do you expect's happening in that school district? It's operating with less resources. I could go on, Marianne.
All right. Let's move to healthcare, the next issue. Because of a financing model which relies on for-profit insurance companies, the U.S. leads the world in healthcare spending without corresponding quality in healthcare outcomes. It is estimated that annual savings under a national single payer or Medicare for all would be $500 billion. You have all expressed support for such a system. But what should the state of Illinois do until the national single payer is enacted? Should Illinois have a single payer system? Join a multi-state single payer partnership? Which? Please be as detailed as possible in your answer. Senator Biss, you're first.
The last thing in the world that we should do is wait for this federal government to solve health care for us. Of course we need to enact a single-payer system here in Illinois. Of course we do. Frankly, that's where Obamacare came from. It was done in Massachusetts first and then eventually copied by the federal government. If we want national single-payer, a state is going to have to go first. It should be us. Let us lead the way. Do I support a multi-state compact? Of course I do. The bigger the pool, the better. I would love to enter into a compact, but I'm not going to wait for Scott Walker to sign up for single-payer health care any more than I'm going to wait for Paul Ryan. We're going to do it here. And so the question is, how do you finance it? And let's talk truth. There's no way in hell that today's Illinois state government can afford single-payer health care. And some people say that that means we shouldn't try to do it. That's wrong. In fact, we should fix our tax system. In fact, we should wake up to the modern economy, where more and more of our economy is tied up in the financial sector and the Board of Trade and the Mercantile Exchange and the hedge funds and private equity firms than in any other time in American history, and the rest of us are paying more and more and our government's still broke. If you fix that, if you create a financial transactions tax, that, by the way, the people at the Board of Trade would barely even feel. If you finally tax carried interest, closing the Rauner loophole, if you acknowledge the extraordinary wealth of this state that, God damn it, go outside in the loop in the middle of a workday and look up and tell me we're not rich. Of course we are. If we're willing to be bold in how we conceptualize the kind of tax code we should have built in this state, we can afford single payer on the state level. And then when people around the country see what it's like, see what it does for the quality of life here, see what it does for the health of people in Illinois, and see what it does, yes, for our economy, the rest of the nation will not be far behind.
Thank you.
I want to lead in something in Illinois rather than debt and jail governors. And one thing we can do is Medicare for all. And like Daniel mentioned, it's going to make it easier in this state for employers to not have to worry about health care as much. There's going to be a single payer, everything's taken care of, everyone's taken care of in the state. And that's what's going to keep people in this state. It's because their family members are going to be taken care of, they're going to be taken care of. But we also have to look too at alternative medicine sources and the expansion of cannabis for medical for treatments. And we've not done that. The commission that was supposed to expand those is disbanded. So again, Illinois needs to lead. And how do we fund this? Well, we're going to fund this through progressive income tax. We're going to fund this by increasing the need and the want of people to stay in Illinois because of this system. They're going to pay sales taxes, they're going to pay income taxes, and they're going to pay property taxes. Ultimately, health care in the Constitution is not labeled as a right, but it dang well should be. And we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our family members, our children, our aunts, our nieces, our grandparents, everyone, to provide them with a basic sense of dignity and a basic sense of, do I either get food or do I get the health treatment that I need? And a single payer will do that.
Thank you.
I think it'd be hard to explain in 2 minutes how to go to single-payer health insurance in the state, but let me try. First of all, I think that's where we need to go, morally and economically. Morally, it's the right thing to do. Economically, the first state that figures this out is going to have an economy that expands exponentially, outpace every other state in America. We cannot live in a community. We don't want to be part of a family where every member is a single illness away from personal bankruptcy. Now, in this state, only 6-7% of people are uninsured. But before we pat ourselves on the back, we need to understand that that's hundreds of thousands of people. We also need to know that hundreds of thousands more have insurance that's way too expensive for them. And even more have insurance that won't cover the medical issues that they'll face. So our system is in crisis, even if the statistics don't show it that way. The way to expand it, I think, is 3- or 4-fold. First, we start with the pools that already exist, that have been developed by municipalities, by counties, by other units of government that already cooperate with each other, that have similar experience history and can be combined and have enormous buying power. Expand that system in our state. Then bring the largest employers together and allow them to cooperate, in essence, to collude against the insurance companies with state support. Because if we can get their buying power, then everything else becomes easy. Immediately, I would expand Medicaid. The way that Medicaid works in Illinois now, if you qualify, if you have long-term care in a facility, you have to spend down your wealth. And then the state allows you to have $1 a day for spending money. We're impoverishing our people. We should raise that immediately because the federal government will subsidize it by 50%. If we work in those 3-4 areas, we can move ourselves towards a single-payer system rapidly in Illinois.
Thank you.
The individual that you select to be your next governor has got a monumental task to get this state's house in order. And part of getting that house in order is how you're going to provide medical care. I talk more about medical care than I do medical insurance. Single payer is for insurance. But in March, I laid out a proposal as to how you provide medical care for Illinois residents because we're doing it throughout the state, and I call my program iCare. And this is modeled at every university campus today. If you're sick, you go to a health clinic, you're seen by a doctor. It's a single payer model. You get your prescription, you go home, you get feeling better. If you're an uninsured person living in a impoverished community in Illinois, you have nowhere to go but to an emergency room. That's why we drive up the cost of Medicaid in the state of Illinois, and that's why 42% of the state budget is consumed by Medicaid. 42%, almost half. So when we begin talking about expanding Medicaid or expanding health care services, we have to be self-conscious as to how we're going to pay for it. My proposal is a more affordable way. I'm for expanding community care programs, that everybody has the same access to dental care, to regular checkups, preventive medicines, not having to pay $300 to have an infection treated or a respiratory virus taken care of at an emergency room, but one where you can go to a community care outreach center and get it taken care of the way you can at a health center today on any university campus. I also plan to use all those university health service systems as the basis in which to grow community care services. Because in our major cities, look at the universities, how they sponsor and lead the way into our medical research and the care at our medical hospitals. It's a model that's in place. It's a model that should be expanded to improve health care, not just in Illinois, but in the whole United States.
Thank you.
Okay, on behalf of Medicare for All, I support that. I also support single-payer health care. But the reality is that the biggest elephant in the room is how you're going to pay for it. The costs are astronomical. As your governor, our job is to lead. So what I would have to do is organize on a national level with all the groups out here that are fighting for health care for all. That's very important, because how are we really going to fund $500 billion? It's not that easy. The average cost for a shooting victim is $36,000 and beyond, depending on what kind of care they need. And in Chicago, we have a homicide, a crisis, an epidemic of violence, and what I'm talking about is how it spills over into paying for these costs for medical care. What I would do is study systems that are like, we have about 11 countries worldwide that have universal health care, like Switzerland and Singapore. What I would do is study their systems over there when it comes to universal health care and find out how they're making it work in those countries, and then bring that model back to the state of Illinois. Right now, we have about 900,000 people in Illinois that are uninsured. And we have to really put a dent in that number, and as your governor, that's what I plan to do. But I'm not going to play with the people. We're talking about astronomical costs. The progressive tax is not going to bring in enough money to pay for Medicare for everybody. We have to find ways to work with the federal government and find ways to raise the money here in the state to pay for those expenses, because it's not going to be easy. But I do have a plan to study models that work and implement them models in Illinois when I become your governor, and that would be my response there, okay?
Thank you.
All right.
And just for the follow-up, again, just short follow-up, I wonder how quickly can this single payer happen? Some of us aren't going to be around for 20 years, maybe. I think people want to see results sooner. How quickly can we see this happen?
Listen, it won't be immediate. I tell people that a state that's going to do single payer is going to be a large state, an affluent state, a blue state, and a state with a fiscally solvent government. 3 out of 4 ain't bad. We have got to fix our tax system to get our house in order, and it's going to take some time. I don't want to pretend otherwise. But I do want to say that we heard some good, learned answers on this question, but I think we also heard one thing. If you look under the hood, if you want single-payer health care implemented in the state of Illinois, you've got one choice in this race. And that shouldn't be surprising. It's something I've been for since I first ran for office in 2007, when it wasn't cool, when people didn't get asked about it in debates. It's the right way. I've been fighting for it. I'm going to keep fighting for it.
It's all of you guys out there. It's us fighting for this. Movements come not from politicians, but from people. And if we put enough pressure on our politicians, things can happen a lot faster than normal bureaucracy. We do have to get our financials in order. We are horrible right now. Unfortunately, the last 2 years of Bruce Rauner dug us a deeper hole. But with the tax system, we're changing to progressive income tax and immediately offer tax credits to individuals that make under $100,000. We can do that today. Keeping people in the state through small business reform, that's how we pay it, and that's how we can get it in the next 5 years.
On this issue, I don't think it's a time for caution. I think it's a false choice to say that we need to spend the next few years getting our financial house in order, and then we can get to the issue of single payer. I think one drives the other, in fact. I think our costs are high because we allow the for-profit entities to charge a premium associated with risk that, in fact, doesn't exist in the system. We need to throw them out, and the only way to do that is to move quickly, to allow the government to work with large businesses, to allow them to collude against the large insurance companies.
How soon could a plan be put into place? If I'm elected governor in January and sworn into office January 19, July 1st. July 1st, you would see extended care in our communities to help those who have no health coverage, because we can't wait till 2020 for a constitutional amendment. It's got to happen because people are sick. People have toothaches. People are suffering. People need medical care. So, waiting for legislation to pass doesn't make anyone feel better. And we have to have a plan in place that's going to reduce how much it is costing the state today in emergency rooms. That's what's eating up the state budget in order for us to begin to move to a single-payer model and to actually have money to make health care affordable in the state.
Mr. Hardiman gets the last word.
Yeah, I don't believe in just saying something just to sound good. My thing is it's going to take time to get single-payer health care here in Illinois. Everybody knows that. But in the meantime, we can take on these pharmaceutical companies and make sure that they reduce some of these prices for medication here in the state of Illinois. And as your governor, I plan to set up a task force to find more ways in how we can ensure the close to 900,000 people here in Illinois and actually reduce that number at least by 30 or 40%, just to be honest with the audience here, because we're talking about astronomical funding there, and nobody has an overall solution for it, but we must have to, it's mandatory that we study what works and then move forward and try to help the people to the best of our ability, one person at a time. So that task force will be comprised of a lot of the experts in that field of dealing with medical funding and how we can reduce prices with medicine and also insure people in Illinois. That's going to be very important. So if we put a 30% dent in that number there, I think we'll be making some progress.
Our next issue, thank you, mass incarceration. The United States has the highest rate of incarceration in the world. This is an absolutely amazing fact for a wealthy, politically free society. So, what accounts for this? Also, name one specific law or policy for which you would advocate to significantly reduce our prison population and explain exactly how this would help. Mr. Patricia, you're first.
Unfortunately, we had a Democrat that in '96 put together a plan for mandatory minimum sentences and 3 strikes you're out. You ask why people are in jail today? That's why people are in jail today. And what do? Because right now we have, it's kind of 2 similar issues. We have individuals that are coming out of being incarcerated, and we have veterans coming home. And both feel out of place. And we need to stop funding private prisons. We need to stop funding putting people back in prison and using that money to rehabilitate these people so that they feel like they can belong back in society. You ask why people keep going back to jail? Because they don't feel like they belong. Also, minor drug offenses need to go away too. And through legalization of cannabis and issues of that nature, we're going to reduce the prison population significantly. Prison's for bad people, but people sometimes go through bad times, and we know that. And there's in Cook County Jail, there was a new TV show on CNBC about them actually, a chef coming in and teaching these incarcerated individuals how to cook pizzas. And it's actually the best, they said it was the best pizza in town. It wasn't deep dish though, I know, but it was the best pizza in town. And those programs and those volunteers need to be allowed in these prisons to teach skills to these individuals so that when they do, again, go out in society, they don't feel like they end up either homeless or they have to steal and do things that they shouldn't be doing to get back in jail. And those are the things that we need to do. And again, also, I think at a federal level, we need to remove mandatory minimum sentences in the 3 strikes you're out policy.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy.
So almost every issue that we face in Illinois has been solved elsewhere in the United States. The issues that we have around criminal justice reform have largely been solved in other places. We need to end the school to prison pipeline. We need to stop criminalizing poverty. We need to stop criminalizing people's skin color. That's what's going on in Illinois, and it doesn't have to be like that at all. We know that in places like New York, they'll go and expunge 800,000 outstanding warrants for they're 10 and 20 years old for minor crimes, nonviolent crimes, and free up people to get jobs and have careers and not worry that every stoplight arrest is going to lead to jail time. We know in other places, they didn't allow the mayor to close half the mental health facilities in the city. When you do that, do you know where they get mental health care? Cook County Jail. That's what's happened here in Illinois. We can't allow people to go to jail because they don't have money for bond. Come on. Force them to spend days there, missing job, losing work, maybe not making a car payment, making it impossible for them to continue to live freely in the land of the free. We need to provide people with lawyers and counsel. We were dedicated in this country to a system of law that allowed everybody to have representation. And that's just, that's just something we remember in this country. It's not true anymore. People don't have great access to lawyers, either civil or criminal, and they ought to. Then we control people's lives for days, for weeks, for months, for years at a time. We teach them no skills. We release them from prison. And they don't know how to drive a car, they don't have a driver's license, they can't work anywhere. It shouldn't be like that, and it doesn't have to be.
Thank you.
I believe the most effective way that you reduce mass incarceration is by analyzing nonviolent offenders and whether or not they really deserve prison time. And nonviolent offenses could very much better be served doing community service throughout this entire state, having an opportunity maybe to serve in the Illinois National Guard, looking at alternatives as to how an individual may pay his restitution to society for the ills that they have done, rather than costing the state through paying the cost of their incarceration. The other part of this that is very, very important to understand is that we cut on the recidivism rate of those who return to prison because they have no out once they are released as to how they are reacclimated into society and how they have gainful employment. And furthermore, if we do not continue to look at how we can expunge those convictions, those individuals remain a detriment in trying to find affordable housing because they don't qualify. They continue to be moved to the end of the list to try to get employment, and typically they create another crime and they wind up back incarcerated in our system. That is a system that we have to analyze if we are going to prevent the incarceration rate that we have in the state of Illinois today.
Thank you. Mr. Hardeman.
Yeah, the Hardeman-Avery plan to reduce recidivism here in Illinois. We have a plan to convert some of these minimum security penitentiaries into institutions of higher learning. And when you talk about policy, I do support decriminalizing marijuana so some of the offenders that have been locked up for lower level drugs will not serve time, but they will go to a program, and then we can reduce recidivism by 30% by making sure that when young men and women are released from prison, they obtain at least a bachelor's degree or associate's degree. That's important. Me being an African-American male, I do understand mass incarceration. I have a friend of mine in the audience who actually works with the campaign, Mr. Eric Russell, president of the Tree of Life organization of Illinois, Tree of Life of Illinois, and we do a lot of work in criminal justice reform and police accountability. What nobody really wants to talk about, I'm one of the only candidates up here that stood up against police brutality, excessive force, and police corruption. So when you talk about mass incarceration, you have to address police corruption as well. Just a week ago in the Chicago newspaper, they had to overturn 100 wrongful convictions of some young men from the north side and west side of Chicago because of police corruption. We have to address both of these issues head on. We have a situation where the Department of Justice ruled during their investigation that the Chicago Police Department is one of the most corrupt police departments in the United States. We have to deal with these issues out here and make sure that people are not being locked up wrongfully. And as your governor, I plan to lead that charge because it means a lot to me personally, because I know a lot of young men and women that have been wrongfully convicted. As a matter of fact, Eric Russell, myself, and some attorneys from Northwestern University and the University of Chicago, we stood at a press conference where we filed a federal lawsuit against the police department here in Chicago to make sure that they end the madness. We have to end the madness. I also work with former State Representative Eddie Washington on making sure we got TAM's Supermax prison closed down. I got a chance to visit all the penitentiaries in Illinois, and we're working aggressively now to make sure if these prisons are not treating people humanely, we will try to close them down. So that's important, and states have to stop the practice of funding of, like opening up prisons in downstate communities just as a source of revenue. We have to stop that and attract more businesses to the state of Illinois so we can hire people instead of just making sure we have more prisons. So that's part of the Hardeman-Avery plan to reduce recidivism by 30%.
Thank you.
All right.
I think the first question was, why do we have mass incarceration? And the answer is because of racism. Because of institutionalized racism that affects every aspect of American society. That's why. So what do we have to do about it? Well, it starts with sentencing. Of course, I support the legalization of the recreational use of marijuana. I'm a proud co-sponsor of Senate Bill 316 because of the racism endemic in the way that drug laws are enforced in Illinois and America today. But I have some hard talk for us to have. It's become, thank God, it's become politically easy for folks to stand up and run for office and say, we are going to reduce sentences for nonviolent crimes. We got to look at all sentences. We got to acknowledge the role that enhanced sentences and mandatory minimums and increases for decades played in exploding our prison population, and we have to take a look at all of that. I had the most stunning visit to Stateville. It wasn't a usual politician tour run by the warden. It was a visit with a teacher who teaches a class on mass incarceration and philosophy to 15 men with natural life sentences. 15 men who under current law will never see the outside of that prison, but are educating themselves, first of all, because it's a fulfilling way to spend time, but second of all, just in case. Men who 20 and 30 and 35 years ago were convicted of terrible crimes and right now are biologically totally different people who pose no threat to society, but because some politician was scared of a Willie Horton TV commercial, they'll be locked up until death. That's what we have to fix. It's not only about sentencing. Let's talk about recidivism. Let's talk about full access to mental health care and substance abuse treatment and education and vocational training inside our correctional system. Let's talk about the Sheridan Correctional Center that has innovative substance abuse treatment and a much lower recidivism rate. Let's talk about importing that into our entire system. We can solve this problem if we choose to treat every single person like a human being. Black Lives Matter.
As a follow-up, just quickly, perhaps I'm wrong, but I believe Mr. Hardiman, Senator Biss, Mr. Paterakis all said legalizing marijuana. The other two did not. You all did not. Let's take that question by itself, and then, if marijuana is legalized, where does the tax money from marijuana go?
First and foremost, some people are going to say that we need studies on legalization of cannabis, but the studies have already been done. That's why we have medical cannabis in the first place, first and foremost. And the money that we have a bad track record of raising new taxes. Look at the soda tax, for example, to go to places.
So you don't want it taxed at all?
No, I do. We're going to tax it, but we're going to lockbox it, short Al Gore phrase there, into education, because we have had politicians promise us new taxes, but these new taxes potentially just end up in the general fund, and they don't go to their intended purpose. We're going to fund education with the legalization of cannabis.
All right.
So my position on legalization is full decriminalization, full access to medical marijuana, and we should put the decision about full legalization in the hands of medical experts and scientists. I've talked to other, people who are governors of other states. I've talked to Governor Hickenlooper about the experience in Colorado. And I think he feels that at this time they're on their road to getting the legislation right. It's not right yet, and what they did originally was wrong. I believe that we could study the issue for 6 months, give it to the University of Illinois, and make a decision on their recommendation.
What was wrong about it? Why is it wrong?
What happened in Colorado? There were 3 or 4 issues that popped up almost immediately. The first is that the THC content of modern marijuana is much higher than anything that we experienced in our youth, to the degree that we experienced it.
Speak for yourself. I'm older.
It would be easier. It would be easier to be candid if my daughter left the room. Yeah, no more kids at debates. So they don't have a maximum THC level, so people are overdosing on marijuana,
Okay.
which was not possible 10 years ago. 2, the original packaging and design, marijuana came in edibles disguised as gummy bears,
Right.
which were attractive to children. And at the Children's Hospital in Denver, a number of kids were admitted with overdose to the gummy bears. So they've said that you can't package them like that anymore. Then the packaging itself, he said, did not come in tamper-proof containers, or let's say the sort of containers you get medicine in. which allowed it to be accessible to children and others who shouldn't access it. And they have gone through a series of reforms, and I think they're getting to the right place.
All right, appreciate that. Thank you, Superintendent Diber.
I believe you want to know where the money's going to go.
And you did not say whether or not you would want to legalize it.
Oh, I would legalize it, but I'm the one candidate that said you're going to have to vote and tell me yes. It's going to be the will of the people.
A referendum.
I'm only going to do it by referendum. I'm going to do it right. I'm going to do it like Colorado did, like Washington, California did. I've said this. I'm not going to let a bunch of lobbyists pass it in Illinois. You know, some people joke because I say, you know, lobbyists come in with a suitcase of gummy bears and then the next day they vote yes. So it's not going to happen that way in Illinois. If I'm governor, it's going to happen the right way, in that you, as people, are going to vote and you're going to say yes, we want to legalize this.
And the tax money.
And then the money. Where does the money go? Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be the one that's going to say the money's going to go to the general fund. And I'm going to tell you why. Because if it goes to the general fund, then we can use some of it to help pay for Medicare, Medicaid. Okay, we can help improve some of these costs of what we've been talking about here on single payer. We can utilize it that way. I don't necessarily look at this money going strictly to education. I think there's many other things we have to think about. Funding and healthcare is a big one.
Thank you. Back down to Mr. Hardeman.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Diber. You know, I look at it as being a referendum, but we have to understand that marijuana is a gateway drug like tobacco and alcohol to people using higher level drugs like cocaine and heroin. We have an opiate crisis going on across America right now, so we have to be mindful as leaders before we just jump on the bandwagon. But in regards, if marijuana recreational use is legalized, what I would do is use the tax money that comes from that to support veterans and senior programs. That's where that money will be used in the Hardeman Navy administration, because we need to move forward and help all people in Illinois to the best of our ability. But you have to, you know, I teach in the class, I'm a professor in the field of restorative justice right now, and we have to really understand that you can look this up, the numbers don't lie. Marijuana is a gateway drug. I grew up in the Henry Hornet projects, and a lot of my good friends ended up being strung out on drugs, and they started out drinking beer, alcohol, smoking marijuana. They became full-fledged drug users. So we have to be careful. But as a governor, like I said, I plan to lead the state in a sincere way, so I have to look at all the consequences once we legalize it, because I have a lot of young kids that look up to me, including my own kids, okay? I've been married 18 years. Now, this is the thing. I don't want kids thinking it's okay to just run around smoking marijuana every day. I just don't want to see that happening to 13-year-olds and 12-year-olds, okay, as your governor. All right.
Thank you.
Am I the only one who's trying to imagine the experience that Chris and Bob had with a suitcase 30 years ago? Anyway, it doesn't matter. I think that we should fully legalize marijuana, and the kind of regulation that will work is the kind of regulation that we have for alcohol, for tobacco, with clear labeling, with clear laws about minors, with clear laws about marketing. It's appropriate. And by the way, as for where the tax dollars go, you know what? 99 times out of 100, when a politician says, I'm going to earmark this revenue source for that nice thing, they're just making it up. The money is all fungible. The point is that the revenue will be useful.
All right, next issue, economic justice. And we've talked a little bit already about this, but let's still take this issue on. The tax structure in Illinois is regressive, hitting middle and lower income persons much harder than the wealthy. You've all expressed support for a progressive income tax, which would address this economic injustice. But it does require a change to the Illinois Constitution. And it has been clear for many years that a progressive income tax is the obvious and just solution to Illinois' financial problems. Yet, to date, Springfield has lacked the political will to do this. If you fail to get a progressive income tax passed, what is your contingency plan to address taxation injustice in Illinois? In particular, would you target the wealthy, finance, insurance, and real estate sector? Mr. Kennedy, you're first.
So let's all agree that Arian's description of a progressive graduated income tax as the solution to our state's ills and to economic justice is obvious and just. Obvious and just. That's what I think. I think that any elected official knows that that's true. And they've all resisted the move to a progressive graduated income tax because the head of the Democratic Party is a property tax appeals lawyer. And he's making money off of the existing system. That's what's going on. Until we attack that, until we get the dirty money out of politics, we're not going to get the dirty politicians out of government. We should make it illegal for elected officials to have outside jobs that are adverse to the interest of the body they were elected to serve.
What is your contingency?
I would say this. I don't believe that you have to wait 2 years. I don't believe that the only way to get progressivity is to open up the state constitution. I think we can create a progressive graduated income tax in this state in 2019. I think we can do it because it's been done before. I don't think we should look to Springfield or the Thompson Center for our answers. We should look to other states, maybe even other countries and other continents. Let's look to Massachusetts that has exactly the same principle in their state constitution that we do. It requires a flat tax, and yet they figured out a way to make that flat tax progressive by creating deductions, by increasing the earned income tax credit, by allowing it to apply to the middle class. So they're able to compel the wealthiest in the state to pay their fair share. And a fair tax system is critical to everything else.
Thank you.
As I've previously stated, I had laid out a model for a progressive income tax. It's one I've studied, and I would encourage everyone in the audience to study progressive income taxes. Just Google it and look at what other states have done, okay? So that's important to be knowledgeable. But what if it fails? So what's my contingency plan? Well, first and foremost, why are we paying almost $2 billion a year in interest in the state on a debt? I give the General Assembly a lot of credit that they passed $4 billion of bonds, but we got to pay off all these unpaid bills of over $10 billion yet today, so that we're not wasting so much of our money on interest. And that has to be put into the next governor's budget. We have to have a manageable budget that we are not wasting money each year just on debt interest. We have to be smarter. We have to refinance our debt in this state to make it more cost-effective for taxpayers. Secondly, I said in another statement that I'm in favor of a millionaire's tax. That's another alternative to increase revenue in this state. That just takes legislation. I would support that, and I would pass it. But, something that we have to really think about, you can increase taxes or you can quit giving exemptions. And you need to ask yourself, how much state income tax did I pay last year? Did I pay any? Did I pay $250 of state income tax? Everybody should pay some. I keep saying that because there's too many people that pay this, that make hundreds of thousands of dollars. They pay none. That's why we have a tax problem in this state. Some of them are low-income people, some of them are high-income people, but some pay nothing. We all have to pay our fair share. We have to quit giving exemptions on property taxes. The EAV is there. You and I pay it if we don't have any property tax exemptions. We passed another bill to increase the exemption status. Those of us that are the tax mules, we pay more. So that's something we have to do to get our house in order.
Thank you.
Yeah, I too support the millionaire tax, but right now, if the progressive tax fails, we must look at the graduated tax in a range of 1% to 10% of the taxes on wealthy people in particular. Because all of a sudden, I did some research. You have 17 billionaires that live in Illinois. If all the billionaires support each other, they would get 17 votes statewide. Okay, I just want to put that out there. This is the reality. But the billionaires and millionaires should be taxed at a higher level, anywhere from 6% to 10%, so we can make sure we use that revenue for economic justice, because that's something that the will of the people we must organize and hold our elected officials accountable. Because a lot of people talk a good game, but it's going to take a massive organizing effort to make the progressive tax a reality. And if that fails, then it's going to take another massive organizing process to make sure we get another type of tax system where the rich people continue to pay. Because some of these billionaires, they only started supporting the progressive tax since they started running for office. That's the only reason they support. It's just being honest with everybody. I'm a working class individual, and I believe that everybody should pay their fair share. So my thing is fair share and equal taxing people statewide, depending on their income level. If a guy's making $1 million, I believe they should be paying at least 8% to 10%, okay? If you're making $30,000, 1 or 2% of your income should be taxed. So to me, it's a no-brainer, but if you want economic justice, like Kennedy was saying, you have to get the cronyism out of the dirty money out of politics. It's not gonna happen with the system we have right now. It's just not gonna happen. And I'm gonna take this from the past, I'm gonna twist it a little bit. John F. Kennedy made this statement I'm using for Illinois. It's not so much what Illinois can do for everybody, it's what we all can do for Illinois as well. Okay, really, it's what we all can do for Illinois because everybody's depending on the state governor to take care of everything. And I would be lying to you as your governor to tell you we're going to solve every problem because we're not. It's going to take some time. But one thing I plan to commit to is to make sure that the progressive tax is successful here in Illinois.
Thank you.
Okay.
To answer the narrow question, if we fail to enact a progressive income tax, there are other things we can do to find progressive revenue. A LaSalle Street tax, closing the Bruce Rauner carried interest loophole. These are things that would bring in real money, and they're consistent with a modern economy. And the question of whether you're going to have a governor fighting for those items is on the primary election ballot, not on the general election ballot. But now let's back up and talk about the premise. Let's talk about the progressive income tax. Yes, it's been hard to get there. Yes, as we had the most aggressive fights on this issue in 2013 and 2014, when we had enough votes in the Senate, we came just a small handful of votes shy in the House. That's true. We didn't have a governor fighting for it. We didn't have people in top leadership in the legislature fighting for it. Chris, you said that we didn't have top legislative leaders fighting for it because of their property tax business. That may be true. But at the time, you and J.B. Pritzker were using the property tax appeal system, not fighting with me to enact a progressive income tax. We need someone who's not going to just put their name on a list, but who's going to fight to find the votes. And if we have a governor who explains to the people that if you think that our tax system in Illinois is unfair, that's because it is. That's because people in the bottom fifth in 2015 paid on average 13% in state and local taxes, where people in the top 1% paid under 5%. I'll say it again. If you were in the bottom, you paid 13. If you're in the top, you paid 5. People feel that in this state. They know that in this state. If we run a campaign for governor that names that explains that says this is the solution, that builds a movement of people together prepared to fight for economic justice, we will find those last few votes. But it's going to happen immediately. We're going to need a governor to fight for it. We're going to need a governor to stake their political capital in that spot on the field. We have to get it done.
Mr. Paterakis.
We have the most regressive tax system in the United States. High sales taxes, high property taxes, soda taxes, they're all regressive taxes against the poor. The rich can pay those taxes. The poor cannot. And the progressive income tax is the one tax that is fair to all. I was deeply disappointed when we went 2 years without a budget and came to a conclusion that we needed to raise the income tax for everybody, when we ultimately could have created tax credit tiers to give people that made over 100, or raised it to about 5 to 7%, and gave individuals that made under certain tiers, 250 grand, 100 grand, tax credits. But we did not do that. We choose in Illinois not to do the hard things. We choose to do the easy things in Illinois. When it comes to the taxes, let's use property tax, for example. Rich people, the overall effective tax rate, rich people can get out of things. We already know one individual that can remove toilets and figure out, how to lower his property taxes. Rich people can get out of that. They can't get out of a progressive income tax. And it's about fairness, and that's what bothers me, and that's why I joined this race, is that there were so many individuals, so many Democrats over all these years. There's been a Speaker in the House that has been Speaker of the House longer than I've been alive on this earth, that have had Democrats, that have had Republican governors, and chose not to do anything. But I've known through starting my businesses that the best things, the most rewarding things in life are doing the hard things, not the easy things. And ultimately, these politicians come up here every year and they say, we're going to fight for the middle class, we're going to fight for the poor. But ultimately, when it comes to the poor, no lives matter when it comes to politicians. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy, would you like to respond to what Senator Biss had to say? Here, he'll hand the mic. Thank you.
So I think that's an unfair criticism. And I think it doesn't reflect the reality of the situation. The system that we have in Illinois, the property tax system, it's a racket. That's a technical term. It is. It's like extortion, except there's an intermediary. If the assessor said to you, I'm going to overassess your home, I'm going to overassess your property, unless you give me money, that would be extortion. Instead, what they do is they send an intermediary. They overassess your home or your commercial property, and they send a lawyer in and say, we will get that reduced, but it's going to cost you a third. And then they give that money back to the assessor, to the campaign, to the ward organization, to the Democratic Party of Cook County. That system is preserved because that assessor is the head of the Democratic Party in Cook County. He got that job from the head of the Democratic Party in the state, who's the Speaker of the House, who Daniel Biss supported in that role repeatedly.
All right, we need to keep moving along, but that was part of my next question is, if the progressive tax is so, everyone wants it, it would be so easy to get, what about the Speaker? It goes this way, right here to Mr. Diber. The Speaker's not going away. So what are you going to do to work with the Speaker? Can you work with the Speaker? Where do you stand? And can you do that in 30 seconds?
Sure. Yes, I can work with the Speaker. I can work with about anybody. Because when you go sit down with someone and you want them to work with you, first of all, you got to have a good working relationship, and you don't have that by saying bad things about them. Okay? So I don't talk about people negatively. I talk about the issues that are at stake. I talk about what I want to get accomplished. I talk about how you can become part of the solution, how this can benefit you. So if you take that approach and you're open-minded with it, you might be able to show someone like the Speaker how this will benefit him, how it will benefit the state of Illinois, and how we can move the state forward, and his legacy can be positive.
All right, thank you. Let's go down to Mr. Hardeman. What about that? I mean, it seems as if the Speaker would be key in getting a progressive income tax through. Go ahead.
Yeah, first and foremost, Mike Madigan, I don't agree with everything he does, but when I become the governor, I would have to work with him if he's still the Speaker. I would have to. Just being honest with you, because a lot of people will sit up here and try to people please you. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm a straight up candidate running for governor. The reality is that it's all about the will of the people. If we hold our elected officials accountable, we can have them to take care of the business of the people. Right now in Illinois, that's why I'm glad I'm a progressive Democrat. I'm probably the only most sincere progressive Democrat in the state of Illinois. If we organize on a higher level, bring 200,000 or 300,000, I'm talking about seriously, 200,000 or 300,000 people to Springfield and let them know what the people want, Mike Madigan would actually have to concede. Power only concedes to people power. Power's not going to concede no other kind of way. And I plan to organize the entire state around the Hardeman and Avery campaign. Trust me what I tell you. We're going to organize this entire state around this issue. All right.
Senator Biss.
Yeah, I'd like to use a full minute to both respond and answer your question. To the original point, of course it's a racket. We know that. That's the issue. The question is, who do we trust to fix it? Someone who was utilizing it until very recently, or someone who pays almost 10% of his income in property tax, but chose not to appeal because I know that a politician appealing has an unfair chance of getting too generous an appeal, and I didn't want to participate, so I don't appeal out of principle. Who do you then trust to fix the broken system? That's the question. Now, regarding working with Mike Madigan, great point, great point. I voted for Mike Madigan for Speaker in 2011 because he was the Democratic option for Speaker of the House, and I was not going to pick a Republican for Speaker in an environment where the Republicans were in the throes of a Tea Party movement. I'm going to work with anybody. I'll work with any Democrat. I'll work with any Republican. I'm a proud Democrat. I support the Democratic Party, and I'm also firmly planted in the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. In so doing, I've been able to advocate for an independent point of view inside the legislature and still pass more than 80 bills into law. That's how you get something done.
Well, I can tell you the first thing you don't do is call somebody corrupt and inept, because that's what Bruce Rauner did, an expert negotiator, as we saw. Not doing too good. But people have worked with Mike Madigan, both Republicans and Democrats, to get things through. Ultimately, it's going to come from us, the people. I keep talking about the people, but the people do great things. The reason sexual assault is coming into play right now, it's not because of politicians in Hollywood. It's because the people are bringing this to fruition and saying that this is not right, that politicians that are Hollywood elite need to be held accountable. That's what we do. We're going to get the power of the people behind us, but we're also going to offer new leadership within the party saying, you can follow us where we're going to go. This is our path. This is what we're going to do. And too many people, I think, in the House are afraid that they're going to lose their committee positions and their 10-grand bonuses.
All right, next issue. We have to keep moving along. Climate change. Climate change has brought devastating storms, floods, fires, droughts. Sea levels are rising more quickly than predicted. The Government Accountability Office says U.S. taxpayers have already spent $350 billion on these events. Many of the folks here today believe that climate change is not only a survival issue, but a moral issue and a financial issue as well. Either we invest in solutions or we will pay for the consequences. So, what is your timetable to quickly reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Illinois? And please address these areas in your answer: coal, oil and gas, nuclear, agriculture, and transportation. Superintendent Diver. So glad I'm not taking that one. Go for it.
Yes, because I believe in science. But how do you include all those in a time frame? You know, I look at being able to enact some policy within the first 2 years of an administration. I've emphasized that my first year of administration be strictly on state finance, because that's serious business in order to move on to other proposals. But agricultural is the base of clean energy. We know that. Ethanol is a much cleaner fuel. Wind energy, Illinois is abundant in. We haven't tapped the greatest part of wind energy in the state of Illinois, and that's our riverbanks. So I would grow wind energy in the state. I'd grow solar energy in the state. We have to become less dependent on fossil fuels. We know that because they're a finite resource. Do you abandon coal 100% in the state of Illinois? No. Why? Because coal is a mineral, and it's got all kinds of other potentials other than just being a fuel for burning, which emits carbon, as we know. And the last, I think I got all of them there, Mary Ann, but I want to talk about one other. Oil, okay? You know, we have several refineries in the state of Illinois that are employing a lot of people. We can't just abandon those refineries, but that fuel needs to be designated for power productions in agriculture and in transportation systems that require high horsepower engines, and we need to look at lower horsepower vehicles for people transportation, electric vehicles, et cetera, and promote that through our university research in the state.
Thank you. Mr. Hardeman.
Well, you know, there's a lot of chapters to my life. I actually worked with State Rep Karen Yarbrough out in the Hillside area. We got the incinerator closed down in Hillside right off Manheim Road, and I worked with the mayors of Waukegan, North Chicago, and I attended a lot of forums with mayors from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and Toledo, Ohio, to deal with making sure the lakes stay great, the Great Lakes. So I would like to be seen as the #1 governor that takes on the issue of no fracking here in Illinois, dealing with, and then also we need to really, and I want to say this, I understand the economy, but if we know that there are companies, oil companies, and we got these people doing business with the gas and all that, we need to shut the companies down if they cannot show us a fail-proof plan that's going to make sure the environment stays clean and healthy. We shut them down until they get it right. We have to stop looking at just the money when it comes down to hazardous elements and gases and toxins being released into the air here in Illinois. So I want to be seen as the no fracking governor, and I mean that. When I ran for governor in 2014, I also was a no fracking governor then, and we got a lot of support for that. But at the same time, we have to just take a look at it. If people cannot show us a plan that's going to ensure that the environment is healthy, we have to shut them down temporarily. That's what I would do. Because there's nothing else you can do right now because those companies are employing people, and we have to do what we have to do to just go there. And once again, I'll set up a real strong, I was a little bit under the weather today, so you have to forgive me. Excuse me. I'll set up a task force also to go visit all those companies in Illinois and look at their plans, safety plans, and then we'll make our decisions from there.
Thank
All right?
you.
Thank you.
Senator Biss. The timetable to quickly reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. I really appreciate the breadth of the question. I was the first candidate for governor when Donald Trump revoltingly pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord to say that when I'm governor, Illinois will voluntarily continue to meet those standards. By the way, Bruce Rauner still hasn't done that, and there are Republicans in this country who have. It's unconscionable. I was the first candidate in this race to say that I was going to commit to a 100% clean energy goal for the state of Illinois. So, what do? Number one, we should move immediately to ban fracking. We tried to pass a fracking moratorium in, I think it was 2013, perhaps 2014. We came just a few votes short in the Senate. It's time, clearly with all the additional information we have now, to ban fracking. We have to move aggressively to expand renewable energy, solar, wind, utilization of efficiency, and we need to move quickly away from the burning of the various fossil fuels to produce energy. Now, to do that in a way that is economically just and politically saleable, you have to transfer people who are currently at work in these industries in new jobs with comparable pay and comparable benefits. You don't say, hopefully things will turn out for you eventually. You say, here is the new clean energy economy, and here is a job for you in it tomorrow. Next, thank you for asking about agriculture and transportation. We focus on energy, which is important, but it is only one of three critical contributors to fossil fuel. Agriculture is crucial, transportation is crucial. So in transportation, part of what you do is increased vehicle emission standards, but part of what you do is investment in mass transit. And investment in mass transit is not only about trains in the Chicago area. It's about mass transit in communities all across the state, including real investment in bus service in mid-sized communities, which transforms not just the environment, but economic justice by connecting people to jobs. And finally, when it comes to agriculture, we have to break this broken and frankly corrupt notion that supporting farmers means supporting giant global agribusiness. We have to organize around a sustainable vision of agriculture that doesn't pollute, that doesn't destroy the land, and doesn't essentially prey upon our resources and expropriate them to other countries.
Thank you.
No one in this state, no one in this country deserves dirty air and dirty water. And what we've seen in Flint, Michigan, even some areas within the city of Chicago, that isn't the case for some. First off, everyone's talked about fracking. Fracking, the biggest issue is earthquakes. People said, the scientists on the fracking side said that it won't cause earthquakes, but guess what? It caused a lot of earthquakes. Ask Oklahoma. And we have a fault line running through the bottom of this state. It's not for us. We were told by the energy industry that pipelines do not leak, but we've seen that they do, and a lot, and they misreport it to the government. And those operations need to be shut down. Every time they lie, those corporations should be either fined heavily to clean it up and a hefty fine, or they go out of business. We also started, how do we also get rid of our dependence on petroleum products? It's a common theme tonight, but hemp production within this state as another cash crop could be used to replace petroleum products. It's a great opportunity that will get rid of a lot of plastics. We also got to look at Lake Michigan. That's where we get most of our water from. And as much as we can do to save Lake Michigan, our polluters in Indiana and Wisconsin are doing just the exact opposite. They're pumping waste into the lake, and we need to hold our neighbors accountable if they're going to do that as well. Talk about nuclear. Zion, Illinois, has a nuclear plant that has a mass amounts of toxic waste station there. And the government has done nothing to help them get rid of that. We need to change that, shut down those nuclear plants, and help those communities that were affected by those plants. Mass transit needs to be for everybody, and I'm excited about the automation of transit where people that go to work can actually have their cars be used while they're working to move people around, because the less cars we have on the road, the less trucks we have on the road, the less pollution that we're putting up into the air. And we also need to invest in new technologies like high-speed rail to connect Chicago to the southern part of this state, and clean up Union Station first and foremost, because I don't know how many people drive or go in Union Station, the Metro, but it is dirty, and I don't feel comfortable going through there. We need to work on that station first and foremost.
Thank you.
So I believe global warming is real and that mankind caused it and accelerated it. But it's interesting. I read in the Chicago Tribune about 2 weeks ago an article that quoted one of the meteorologists, one of the most prominent meteorologists on television in the Chicago area, who said, yes, global warming is real, but he wasn't sure that man had contributed to it. That's where hundreds of thousands of people are getting their information. We have a lot of work to do in our own community to raise up this issue so that people will respond. When I ran the Merchandise Mart, we became the world's largest LEED certified building. It's important because almost all power and energy is used in the built environment. The building next door, the Apparel Center, it became LEED certified. We have the largest and second largest LEED certified buildings in Chicago, the first LEED certified hotel in Illinois, and the largest LEED certified hotel in the United States. I chaired the Cook County Sustainability Task Force, and I was part of the Green Ribbon Committee for the city of Chicago. I know what a government can do. As a real estate, let's say, owner and occupier, the state of Illinois is the largest landlord in the state. It doesn't even know how many buildings it has, but it should commit that all of them are fueled by renewables within 10 years. For the rest of the state, we ought to adopt the standards that California, Hawaii have embraced. Full sustainable solutions by 2045. We need to understand that 30% of all electricity in Illinois generated here, generated in coal-fired power plants. We also need to know that that coal is largely coming from Wyoming. We're burning Wyoming coal in Illinois. Just as a country can have a trade deficit, if it maintains it long enough, it'll go bankrupt, so too can a state. We need to end that. We need to understand that nuclear power is dangerous and dirty, and that fracking has no place in Illinois.
Just to move this along so we get all our questions in, just for the follow-up, here is the next question, which is about renewable energy. In a recent Chicago speech, former Vice President Joe Biden proudly said that North America, not the Middle East, is now the energy epicenter. And we want to know today that where are your priorities? Should Illinois divest from fossil fuels against fossil fuel companies? And finally, what is your timetable for a 100% transition to renewable energy in Illinois?
Well, maybe I have special interest in saying yes, we should, because I'm involved in agriculture. So the more ethanol we produce, the better our Illinois markets are for our corn. The more biodiesel that we produce, the better our markets are for our soybeans and for all synthetic oils that you may utilize in vehicles. So yes, I mean, we need to move away from fossil fuels 100% if we can. But the reality is we can't, okay? We can utilize, and a timetable to do this, it will take about 5 years for a state to develop a real manageable plan to move forward.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Hardiman.
Yeah, I totally would say that it's going to take about 5 or 6 years to move from fossil fuel to renewable energy, but I do support that. And my timetable would be once we become the governor and my running mate Patricia Avery becomes the lieutenant governor in 2019, we're looking at probably, 2024, we should be able to move in that direction, okay? That's what I'm looking at. Because we're planning to win this Democratic primary and then go on to defeat Bruce Rauner all the way, okay?
Of course we should, and we should be very clear about the kind of dominance we want to have in the energy field. We shouldn't view doing a whole bunch of fracking here in America as opposed to drilling oil in the Middle East as a victory. The victory is to make Illinois the capital of production of renewable energy, which is also doable. So for the complete transition to renewable energy sources in Illinois, I think 20 years is an ambitious but correct goal, and a goal that I would intend to meet.
Renewable energy needs to happen, and it's going to come from solar first. It's going to happen from solar, and using technology like Elon Musk is doing with his solar roofs, battery storage, that's where it's going to come from. Pretty much everyone talks about this, but nothing ever gets done. But ultimately, what Obama did to the regulations of the auto industry, saying that you had to have your entire fleet above 30 mph by a certain year, that will work. If we impose regulation now and give the producers of these cars, trucks, boats, whatever, a timeline, they're going to have to accomplish that, or they can't sell their products within the state.
I think what the Vice President was saying is that the future of energy is not going to be oil and gas. It's going to be something that's developed in science in North America, and that's very hopeful. The greatest science around battery technology is being performed right here in Illinois at Argonne, and the President of the United States is threatening the funding for that institution. Short term, the most important thing that we can do for the environment, for our economy, for our children, is to protect funding for Argonne and the battery technology that's developed there.
All right. Why don't we just keep the microphone here as well? I think it would go to Mr. Hardiman first. This is my question, just quickly. The sex harassment issue has been so prevalent in the last couple of weeks, and with so much attention on it in Springfield. Could you tell us today, have you ever entered a non-disclosure agreement or any settlement with a woman or a man over claims of harassment? And as governor, how might you advocate for the public to learn if a complaint investigated by the Inspector General, perhaps charged with you or someone in your executive office, is deemed founded? How will the public learn that? So first of all, have you ever entered a non-disclosure agreement or settlement, and what would you do as governor to make sure that those were made public of people in your office? Could you just quickly?
No, I've never been signed no non-disclosure with anybody. And I wouldn't tolerate no sexual harassment of men, women, or anybody in our administration. If it's made public to my administration, we will deal with it appropriately and place that person on an immediate suspension from their duties until we investigate the entire, case. If that person is found guilty, whatever the case may be, that person will be fired immediately. We can't play with that because it's a big issue out here, and I support the process. So that would be the Hardiman and Avery response to that issue there. Okay?
Thank you.
All right, that's a quick answer for you. Okay.
No, I absolutely have not. We have a crisis right now in our whole society and in our state government, and the governor needs to exert clear moral leadership. First of all, in passing legislation, which we've done a little baby steps toward in the last few weeks, but also in setting clear messages and talking about how we have to respect all people, how we have to respect women, how we have to elevate women to positions of leadership. I'm incredibly, incredibly proud of my running mate, Letisa Wallace, state representative from Rockford. If you haven't seen it, check out the essay she wrote recently about the intersection of racism and sexism and the unbelievable indignities that women of color experience when trying to live in worlds of power. We've got a lot of work left to do.
Absolutely not. And what bothers me
When you
the
say
most,
absolutely not, you mean you have not entered any kind of...
yeah, any agreements. But I have a sister, I have nieces, and it's to see what happened. Like the Al Franken one really got to me because there's actually physical evidence of a picture of that. That's why people don't trust politicians. That's why people don't trust Hollywood. That's why people don't trust a lot of people. And the good thing that's coming out of this, it's not a good thing that people have been sexually harassed, but there's a channel now for people to be able to speak out and not feel afraid to speak out. And any administration in any government should have ample transparency to any allegations and any resolutions that occur.
So I worked in private enterprise for 25 years, had thousands of employees, never had a sexual harassment complaint, never had to enter into a settlement, never had to ask someone to sign an NDA. So I want to make that very, very clear. I think the second part of your question had to do with disclosure at the state level. I think that there needs to be a level of disclosure. I think we need to be sensitive to the victims, but I think we can report on the perpetrators, and they need to leave their government jobs.
Thank you.
No, nor have I entered any settlement agreements on sexual harassment. But I do want to make this statement about being clear and transparent, because I think transparency in government, especially with this case of sexual harassment, is where some of the issue lies as to who tries to cover up for what. And so as governor, I would maintain utmost transparency. But I also want to say this in any accusation. I think anybody that's accused is also should be granted due process. And in this country, you're innocent until you're proven guilty.
Thank you. All right, our last question, believe it or not. The Democratic Party. There is a division clearly in the Democratic Party, and it was clear in last year's presidential primary. There is a battle for the soul of the party, as many of you have talked about. It is essentially a difference in economic views. So many of the folks who are part of the PDA and their allies have seen the party move more to the right. They've seen it abandon the Keynesian precepts of the New Deal and move towards trickle-down neoliberalism, exemplified under Clinton and Obama, by a series of free trade deals which enhance corporate power, facilitate privatization of the public sector, dismantle the power of labor, and send U.S. jobs overseas. It is not just the Republicans who are doing this. What is your view of this division in the Democratic Party, and where do you fit in this picture? Senator Biss, you're first.
Just want to make sure I understand. We have no closing statements, correct?
I do not believe there are.
Correct. Okay. Well, that makes sense because this question is the central question. It's the perfect place to start, and it's the perfect place to stop. And I would really call all of your attention to the questionnaires that were submitted on this exact question. What did the five of us plus J.B. Pritzker, who couldn't be bothered to be here tonight, perhaps because he's home trying to figure out how to prepare for release his extremely complex tax returns, how did all of us answer this question? Because, man, it is the central question. It is the nub of the fight for the soul of the Democratic Party. The question is everything more or less okay in our economy? Do we need a few tweaks here or there? Do we need to make sure we don't let Trump and Rauner win so we just drift right slowly instead of quickly? Or do we acknowledge that it's harder and harder and harder for most people to make it? That the middle class is shrinking and the poor are growing, that it's harder and harder for most people to figure out how to pay for child care and health care and retirement and college. Many families can figure out how to pay for one or two of those things. Very few can afford to pay for all. We need to fundamentally transform our economy. We need to rethink things from the ground up. When you ask who's for a LaSalle Street tax, what you're asking is who gets it. Who understands how our economy has changed, and who understands that the political question that we used to ask about what's feasible today is the wrong question in a world where we need to fix a fundamental brokenness. We need a governor who's going to fight for LaSalle Street tax and single-payer health care, not just because those are the right policies, but because those are the fights we need to have to transform our economy. I lived the life that most people live. Bruce Rauner and Donald Trump have never heard of that life. J.B. Pritzker hasn't heard of that life either. We need someone who understands the struggles that most people struggle and is willing to fight for a just economy. We need an election and not an auction. It's time, finally, to get it right.
Thank you.
I'm a proud voter of Bernie Sanders, and I didn't agree with everything that he stated, but ultimately he shined light on the corruption of the Democratic Party, and we've seen that with Donna Brazile coming out with her allegations as well. Money in politics has brought us to where you're either really rich and it gets you to the table, or the corporations are making you rich so it gets you to the table. And most everyone up here is going to talk about the unfairness of millionaires, billionaires running. But I got something for you. If the will of the people, and you have, it is not always fair in this country. Everyone here knows this. You didn't get that promotion. You didn't get that job. Your parents didn't live till they were 90, 100 years old. You had to fight on the street to make something of yourself. My mom grew up in an 800 square foot house with 6 children, and she got to where she was today. And the money and the politics might be out there, but that doesn't mean we just lay up and say, oh, the money's the bad thing. We need to get out there and fight for these things and fight those things. If the money's not going to get you somewhere, great, then find a different way to win. Find a different way to get to the people. Knock on every single door. Talk to every single individual, and that's what we're doing on a constant basis. It's so concerning to me that we have, the Citizens United actually went through, and we need an amendment for Citizens United. And I know we can't do that on the state level. That's first what we need to take to Washington, D.C., because PACs are the evil that have been created by large corporations. Bernie's movement was not just, it became a movement because the people were part of that movement. And all of you here today are going to be part of a movement, whichever way you go. And what we have to do is keep fighting, keep pushing. When things get us down and things aren't going our way, we keep pushing through. That's how we win. And that's how we hold the neoliberals accountable to their party. That is the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is supposed to be for the people, not corporations.
I'm no fan of that notion of neoliberalism. I think a government should be run like a government, a business should be run like a business, a high school should be run like a high school, a college should be run like a college. I don't know that that's the main issue in the Democratic Party anymore, though. I think it's not a question of where you are in the spectrum between liberal and conservative. I think it's turned. I think the big issue today is, are you part of the establishment or against it? Do you want to support a city government that's relentlessly attacking people of color, shutting down neighborhood schools, cutting off access to mental health, decreasing the number of police so crime goes up, cutting off people's access to jobs, undereducating our kids so badly that 87% of the kids in CPS need remedial education before they go to community college. That's not a measurement of those kids. It's a measurement of our government and its lack of investment in those schools. Do you want to support a state that's so underfunding our schools everywhere that 75% of the kids need remedial education, where in Cairo, Illinois, 0% of the kids graduate college ready? That's a system that's being perpetrated by the Governor Rauner, and the first step is to get rid of him. But we need to do some house cleaning in our own party. We need to understand that people are making real money off of this system. It's going to destroy our economy. It's pushing our kids out of the state. It's wrecking our future. And unless we take on the establishment, we'll never change anything. That's why I'm running for governor, and that's why I need your help.
Our policies at the state and the national level have been the direct effect upon our state economy. Our free trade policies that took place is why in my home county of Granite City, U.S. Steel laid off 2,000 workers. It's why today the greatest issue that's debated among our workforce is should Illinois enact right to work? And that's why on March 21st I said no. I signed a pledge. I said Illinois will not invoke right to work in the state of Illinois if I'm governor, because good wages create a good economy. It puts money back. People have to earn a good wage. It's why I believe that today minimum wage in Illinois ought to be at least $10 and it should progress to $15. Because middle class people have to make good money. There has to be a living wage established in this economy. So how do you create that? You cannot grow an economy in this state or in this nation if you do not have a marketing plan. Illinois has no marketing plan to market itself. It has no marketing plan to grow its business. And as your next governor, that's what I will do. I will create a plan to change the economy of the state of Illinois, to grow it. Why does Wisconsin, who's a right-to-work state, advocate that they pay such good wages to companies that they attract? For only one reason, is because their neighboring state, Illinois, has a wage scale, because we have prevailing wage in Illinois. That is why. That is why. You cannot lower your standard in this state and expect to improve an economy. We will grow a good economy in this state in the next administration if we invest in this state, if we invest in policies that help people make a good wage, and we have an educated workforce, that people have 21st century skills that will attract people. An educated workforce is the #1 factor in which we will attract business to the state, along with investing in infrastructure and along with helping businesses with the permitting that they need to make a profit.
Thank you.
Okay, quickly, like I said, there's plenty of chapters to my life. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge a good friend of mine, Mr. Jeff Jenkins. We did a lot of work with the Humane Society of the United States some years ago to help end dog fighting in Chicago, and as an end result, we saved a lot of young men from going to jail, and we helped turn around and retrain some of them aggressive dogs out there and save them from being put down as well, along with Paul Chicago. I just want to salute you, Brother Jeff. That's a part of my life, okay? So this is the thing. The Democratic Party of Illinois needs to reinvent themselves, and nationwide as well. So what I would work on as a progressive Democrat is to lead the progressive movement in reinventing ourselves. That's the reason why we got Donald Trump in office now, because I believe that we did not reinvent ourselves. If you want a governor that's going to tell you the truth, and one way we can end corruption, I plan to videotape all my meetings with special interest groups. So when you want to know what happened in that meeting, take a look at volume #1 and volume #2. Seriously, and I mean that, because we need to get rid of cronyism and corruption in Illinois, and I do believe in term limits, because the reason why we're in the situation we're in right now, because people have become too comfortable in their positions, in these different legislative positions. I have an extensive history working with the entire General Assembly in Illinois, and I mean that. When I used to run Ceasefire, I had chapters in Decatur, East St. Louis, Kankakee, Peoria, Springfield, Danville, Lake County. I know people all over the state. So we have a 2020 plan. I'm just going to focus on 3 issues that we plan to really make a difference in. That's women's rights, because in Illinois, you have women that are working the same job as men are working, and they're not receiving the same pay. We plan to change that immediately within my first 100 days in office. I have a plan to reduce shootings and homicides in Chicago by 50% as well. That's what I plan to make sure that happens, and balance the state budget, and education, place education first. We must address this elephant in the room. Progressive Democrats, we can turn this state around if we all unify. And I say this just as an icebreaker. You don't have to answer it. By a show of hands, how many people are going to vote for T.O. Hardeman? That's just an icebreaker, because I've always been accused of being an angry type of presenter, but I'm a real calm, cool guy, and I want to lead this state to the next level here, and I mean this. Right now, we're about 18% in the polls, and we can take them numbers all the way up with everybody's support. And thank you very much for listening to me tonight. All right.
Thank you to all of you. I believe Laura has a closing statement. What an interesting discussion, and great folks here today listening.
So I know I'm standing here between you and a cocktail. So I want to thank Marianne Ahern for giving us her time.
You're welcome. That was great. Thank you. Thank you. That's great.
I want to thank again the candidates here tonight. I want to thank the volunteers that have helped along the way, including about 25 today.
Yay!
And I want to add 2 personal thank yous. One is to my husband, who actually went wherever they told him to go today and was outside in the sleet because we didn't have anybody out there directing cars. And he's been kind of trying to deal with me through this whole thing. So I really want to thank him. And I also want to thank my coworkers, many of which are in the audience and also got roped into volunteering. And then finally, I want to thank the audience for coming out today in this lovely weather.